me, that was Hollywood. I started engaging with it. There was a horrific screech. The mother came at me and with the sole intention to take away the threat. You can actually see one of the scars there and a big chunk. I can remember this moment like it was slowed so much. Oh my God. You anger the enemy. That's the reason for me being here today still. But it taught me so much. I'm joining the commandos when there's no cameras. I'm extremely disciplined. I'm so proud of that. I'm in the ice bath this morning, freezing my tits off.
When we think about this macho military man, there's a softer side to you.
Anyone telling me what to do, I told them to get fucked.
Did you?
We all have more than we're led to believe. That then got me through Special Forces selection, which I did twice. That's where my company name would come from. It's the moment you step into short-term discomfort for long-term gain.
Isn't it amazing?
Then joined the Royal Marines to create this brotherhood with the Special Forces, building an army, this protection system around me. I was drawn to war when I crashed and burned, that I realised this battle was in here. Pain screams the loudest when it's dying. Should be embraced as the birth of something new.
But that takes its toll, doesn't it?
I didn't want to leave, but then I heard a voice that said,
so, wow. This episode for me is very surreal. I dreamt about sitting in front of this man. And that's the truth, you know, Ollie. I dreamt about sitting in front of you a year ago.
No way.
Yeah, I manifested being here today. Didn't realize it would be in Dubai. We're in Dubai now. So interesting. I've come out here to meet this man in front of me. And this man is an under service. I'm with Ollie Ollerton. He is a TV celebrity. A lot of you in the UK will know him from SAS Who Dares Wins. Then you'll probably have switched over to SAS Australia. He's former British Special Forces. He is a best-selling author. He is founder of Breakpoint UK. We're going to talk about all these things today in this episode. He's a public speaker. And he's husband to beautiful wife and, in his words, love of his life, Laura. His courses include Project U, Stuck to Unstoppable in 7 Sleeps. I'm curious about that one, Ollie. Amongst Ollie's many beliefs and mantras are, discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. But as we will establish from today, it's not just discipline in what you might think in the physical side, but it's also discipline in the mental side. Welcome to So What's Your Story, Ollie Ollerton. I'm really, really wowed by being here and you sitting opposite this in this great studio here in Dubai. Welcome.
No, thank you. Thank you, my friend. And it's so good that you have made the trip to come here. I really do appreciate that. And not too long ago we met, although you had that vision, which, listen, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, okay. That's just, you know what people call that weird. You have the vision, you have the dream, and then it happens. And wasn't that weird? Stop saying weird. People stop saying weird because it's not weird. This is the beauty of who we are.
It is. And in my intro, I didn't say anything about your spiritual beliefs.
Yeah.
Because, people often talk about religion and then they go, oh, no thanks, they switch off. But spirituality is a very different thing, isn't it? And I know it's really key in your world, in your life. And, I don't know where to start with this, but let's go back to a very young age of joining the Royal Marine Commandos. It was such a young age, wasn't it? For anybody to dive into that world of masculinity and Royal Commandos. Oh my God, the word itself, it kind of creates an impression in a lot of people's minds of what you were going through. But looking back at that military early days, Ollie, is some of those experiences shaped you in your approach to leadership, which is what you are, and resilience? Can you help us join some dots there?
Absolutely. Look, I have no regrets about any aspect of my life because I am sat here today. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And if it wasn't for that journey that was behind me, it might be a different story. So there's no way I can turn around and regret stuff. And the reason I'm saying that is because when I got to the military, I've got to say I was a little bit disappointed.
Was you?
Yeah, absolutely disappointed. And I think it's, some aspects of, look at the model, right? This model, 14 years old, can't understand the purpose of school. I was the person in the class that was always looking out the window, and that caused conflict in itself. And at that raw age of 14, I'm joining the military, I'm joining the commandos. So I had a lot of time to build the perception of what it might be. Being, as we all are, every single person on this planet is, until it's rinsed out of them, extremely creative. And, that dream in my head, so when I actually faced the reality of it, it wasn't what I expected. And that was actually the one thing that pushed me forward to Special Forces selection. But the thing is for me, there's no way that can't have some effect on your life. There's no way, especially at that raw age of 18, there's no way that can't influence some aspects of your behavior and your character. So, I'm always looking for the silver lining in everything. I can find a silver lining with even being attacked by a monkey at 10 years old, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the fact is, the silver lining for me was the fact that it amplified who I already was. That's what I think. It didn't make who I am today. It amplified who I already was, because I was extremely in an extremely disciplined childhood. And when I say that, I wasn't out playing on Saturday mornings. We're all about working.
Wow.
Every weekend was the same. You weren't allowed out till at least midday.
So discipline, even as a younger child, was an everyday thing for you?
Yeah, everyday thing. We
but
had
when
a
you say
list of
discipline,
jobs.
do you mean it was rigid?
It was rigid. Yeah, it was absolutely rigid. It was, my father was. And I'm not having a go at my father for this, because some aspects of it, for me, it was a little bit much at that age, because it was almost like it was the freedom as a child taken away from me. But, I'm now reaping the benefits of that now, because I am extremely disciplined when no one's watching, when the lights are off, when there's no cameras. I'm extremely disciplined. I'm so proud of that I am. I'm in the ice bath this morning, freezing my tits off, Whereas a lot of people out there on Instagram, or egogram, as we should call it, are jumping in because they have no idea what they're doing it for, and they're just doing it because they want likes on Instagram.
Yeah.
So for me, I do praise him for that. But the point I'm making is the fact that by the time I got to the military, it started to amplify those skills or that character traits that I already had. However, I would say that because it was so disciplined, that by the time I got to the military, anyone telling me what to do, I told them to get fucked.
Did you?
Yeah, not literally like that.
Yeah, not literally.
Yeah, not literally like that. But it was this whole, I resisted the system so much. And I'm all for, I'm all for resisting the system, especially when I don't agree. But sometimes you can do it too much and it's at your detriment.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's everything, some things that you believe in are worth a fight. But when you're fighting for something you don't necessarily believe in, but it's your ego flaring up, you can't tell me what to do kind of thing. And then you look at that though, and it was the one thing that got me through Special Forces selection. I was more about pleasing the world than it was about pleasing me.
And I guess at 18 as well, when I reflect at, myself at 18, I told you when we came to the studio, I was a father at 20. I didn't know who I was. I thought I did, and I got to grow up very, very quickly, but I don't, that was reflecting like you have later in life. I'm so pleased about that. First, I got two beautiful sons, but secondly, I learned so much about me at an early age. The wheels fell off eventually, but hey, that's life, right? But so you talk about Special Forces as well, because here's you, in your own words, bit of a rebel, bit of a like, don't tell me what to do. It's again a bit of a misconception, I think, because when I read some early material moons ago, by one of the most famous SAS writers, Chris Ryan.
Book down there.
My goodness me, it is. How unbelievable is that? I didn't notice that. There's a Chris Ryan book here beside us that has not been placed. Okay. But
I actually just thought he must have placed that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, there you go.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So Chris Ryan, obviously in some of his memoirs of those early, and he shows some photographs, obviously with people's heads, not shown because of various reasons.
Yeah.
All shapes and sizes. There's a misconception, or certainly I had a misconception. So let me just speak about my own misconception, that to be Special Forces, you had to be like mentally absolutely on point. You had to be physically on point. And of course, there's certain things that I know that they do, you have to go through rigorously to get through the selection process. But is it true that certain characteristics might go, he's a bit fucking wild? And then obviously that wildness is channeled. Is that right? So Special Forces is not,
No.
they're looking for different things so that when you come together as a military operation, you've got these strengths and
I think what the word you said there is channeling that energy into something that they shoehorn it into where they want it. Right. And the fact of the matter is, you look at people in the Special Forces, they've got colourful histories.
Well, I read Ant Middleton,
Yeah,
your friend Ant Middleton's background as well. I mean, bit fucking wild at times, scrapping and, all those sort of things.
But the thing is, look at the ethos of the Special Forces, right? When they went to Whitehall back in World War II, and they went in and, Sterling presented the SAS, they laughed at him. On this big mechanized system, with massive men, massive machines. And he went in saying, well, we want to go with less manpower, less equipment to do more damage. You can't do that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it didn't make sense.
Didn't make sense. But what he was doing was he was recruiting a group of men that I wouldn't even say were leaders. They were pioneers.
Yeah, I agree.
Pioneers that would do anything to get the job done. And they've got enough rope to hang themselves, but they would do anything to get that job done. It's someone that they could send into a job that would have the autonomy to be able to take the shot without phoning for authorization from a higher command.
Right.
And you look at that as an analogy for life. I mean, how many people are looking for authority before they make a decision?
God, yeah.
And missing the opportunity, missing the target.
Wow. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that.
So mavericks, renegades, all kinds of, and I'm not saying everyone, because some are not that way, but I think, there's the law of polarity in life. I think it's, it's like a relationship. You've got to have that polarity. You know what I mean? You can't have anything so one-sided because it doesn't work. So it's good to have that mixture, but you do get some very colourful, very interesting people.
And does it come down to, Ollie, that when you've done intense training with these individuals, so you're a team, you're an operation, and sometimes people parachuted in, parachuted out. I understand all of that, and I know we can't talk specifics here because the SAS is what it is, because it is like secret, right? Yeah. But there's no secret that you were in the Special Forces. No secret that so was Ant Middleton, and is there a dynamic that when you go in, a gear switches, and no matter what, you've all got each other's backs?
Yeah. 100, and this is a really good point as well, because they seem to have this perception, these guys must be, like they must just spend all their time together, stroking each other's hair and holding hands at the weekends. And the bottom line is the fact that it's just like any relationship. You imagine like a job in the corporate world, people dislike, you imagine the corporate world, right? Some people dislike each other, but they let that bleed into their job. You know what I mean? They let that affect the productivity of that company. You imagine that in the Special Forces. That gets people killed.
Of course.
So the person that you dislike becomes your best mate while you're doing the job. That ill feeling and any kind of negative feelings towards someone, that gets left at the door, because something more important has stepped in, and that's life. And that's getting through it together. So the person that wasn't your mate, or you wouldn't hang out at the weekends with, suddenly that person has been through exactly the same training as you know exactly their capabilities, and you back each other up, whatever.
It's interesting. You use the comparison to the corporate world. When I've worked with Americans, they can be very direct, but there's no harboring of a bad thought usually. So in British corporate, it's this sneaky behind the back, maybe trying to stick a knife in, metaphorically speaking, maybe trying to, get someone fired by tripping them up. What I found with my American colleagues was that it was very matter of fact. And I'm imagining that what you're alluding to here is a similar vein, where you might go, what the fuck, and have a right good blow up with each other. And then, right, lads, we're going. It's forgotten because you're going on your job. Yeah. You obviously have transferred over into corporate with Breakpoint. We're going to come more to that during this session. But, there's a dark side to being in the military, isn't there? In as much as a lot of military personnel have suffered from CPTSD and PTSD. You yourself are no exception. Are we okay to go here with this,
Absolutely,
Ollie?
yeah.
Because
important.
You mentioned earlier on about the monkey being attacked by a monkey as a child. I watched you publicly speak at the Wellness Festival where we both attended. Well, what a great festival it was. And I was like so emotionally charged by your story. Can you give us a condensed version of that? Because it is very important to where I'm going to lead to here about facing that monkey, but also what you did out of special forces and some of those experiences that also affected you seriously mentally.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, for me, a lot of people think, oh, the Chimp Story, but I keep reflecting back on that. This is how I look at life, right, Ian? I actually thought this yesterday when I was on the toilet.
I thought I was going to be really like when I was having
at
a shit.
At the top of a mountain.
Yeah, I did what I thought. I was having a shit.
I'm transparent. But life to me is like a jigsaw puzzle, right? Initially through life, we just look for the edges to throw together because that's simple, isn't it? Easy. It's the obvious bits of the jigsaw puzzle. Then throughout life, we're forever piecing this thing together. Now, some people actually manage to start piecing it together and then realize what the final picture looks like before they have to complete it. So they start to get a grasp on what life's really about. Some people never complete the jigsaw puzzle because they haven't got any understanding. They're just so trapped in who they were yesterday. And some people complete the picture and still don't understand what's going on. But really for me, I believe that I'm 3/4 of the way through that jigsaw puzzle and I finally got it. So the rest of it is going to be the prettiest part of that puzzle. And that really is it for me. It's like, that's why I mentioned that, because that day which was my first memory of life on this planet. I don't remember anything before this attack at 10 years old. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I was at the circus. I was, when they were setting up, and behind in an area that I wasn't supposed to be, inquisitive 10-year-old, I found myself. I saw a baby chimp, went over to it in this open expanse, started engaging with it. It was amazing. I was in love with Tarzan at that age as a kid. Seen it that day on TV. For me, that was Hollywood. And I started engaging with it. It was a surreal moment. I was like a baby David Attenborough. And then all of a sudden, there was a horrific screech that I heard that I'll still hear till the day I die. And the mother, which was hidden under a trailer behind, just came at me. And with the sole intention to take away the threat. I was deemed as a threat, and it was doing what any mother would do, regardless of what species you are. It was protecting its young. And that resulted in the chimp just flying through the air, pinning me to the floor and just going absolutely banzai on me, and it went from beating me initially with its fists, took all the wind out of me, to then I could feel the skin. You can actually see one of the scars there, and a big chunk missing there, but, and then started ripping chunks out of me. And it was in that moment when I lay there, and although this was happening so fast, I can remember this moment like it was slowed so much. And I heard the voice. I heard this voice in my head, this transition point that took me to a place I'd never been to before. And it was this thing that said, I'm not dying today. I probably didn't hear those words, but it was a feeling. I'm not dying today. And it was that. I just wanted to lie down and die. And I knew in my heart that if I'd retaliated, then you up the ante, don't you? You anger the enemy. So, but for me, it was something I was prepared to do because I know it was going the other way. I was going to die. So it was in that moment, stepping into that discomfort and embracing, having the courage to retaliate. That's the reason for me being here today still. But it taught me so much. And listen, I wasn't there doing a debrief afterwards with a whiteboard. It's taken me a long time to unpick this. And I've been to South America. I've done ayahuasca and all sorts of stuff. Gone back, met the chimp, and as you know the story. But for me, it was like in that moment, knowing that potential was something that would benefit me forever. And like I say, this is the silver lining bit that I talked about before. Attacked by a monkey. I don't sit there saying, I just want to forget it. I don't want to forget it. I want to unpick it. And I have done in minute detail. For me, it was the fact that we all have that potential. We all have more than we're led to believe, and I stepped into that day, and it was that understanding that then got me through Special Forces selection, which I did twice. That's another story. But then at the brink of, I don't like saying that word that but at the brink of thinking, I don't want to be here. It's a lot easier if I just check out, But in that moment, hearing that voice again that says, no, it doesn't end like that. There's more to your story was the words that I had to have that day to then change that trajectory of my life. But there was a few things that I learned that day. There was, first of all, that was step into that, into that potential. Knowing that anything in life, regardless of who we are, we have to step into the discomfort. We have to just step into the resistance for us to change or achieve anything in life. But then thirdly was the fact that that's where my company name would come from, is Breakpoint, for that very reason. Breakpoint is the moment you step into short-term discomfort for long-term gain. And the way that we're all wired on this planet is we want to take the short-term comfort, and that leads to long-term pain. You know, so there's a few things that I learned from that then, and there is some bad things from that, believe me. But the thing is, from that moment in my life, 10 years old, when I look back now, it was so obvious what was going on. You know, I came from not a wealthy, we were fairly wealthy, and then things changed a little bit, but we were still from a good family. I then went and hunted down, it's probably the wrong words, but the hardest family in the local town, who would then become my sort of protection system. I then, after that, joined the Royal Marines to create this brotherhood of the best armor I could. And then I furthered that with the Special Forces. You don't get any better armor than that. And when I look back now, and me not being able to find this thing that made me feel complete, I realized that from that chimp attack, I was building an army. I was building this bodyguard system around me, this protection system. But I was drawn to war. I was drawn to battle. I was drawn to being in conflict. I was drawn to being in danger. And I was thinking that the solution was out there, forever hunting it down and joining the military, going to Iraq as a mercenary, all this kind of stuff. And it was in that moment where I actually took responsibility for my life, for once in my life, when I crashed and burned, that I realized this battle that I'd been hunting for most of my life was in here. It was in here, yet I'd bounced all over the world looking for it.
Because when I hear you relay that, and there's another piece as well when we spoke at the start about me manifesting or visualizing this moment with you today, there's a moment in your story where you're doing like is it fair to say like a mercenary deal, and you're being paid money to protect some people, and it all goes terribly wrong, but you've seen that outcome before it happened. And that's a whole other story. I don't know whether we've got time for that today, but what I'm alluding to here, Ollie, is what I'm hearing from you relaying those words again to because I've heard the narrative before, is exactly what you say. You're building this around you, this protection, if you want to call it that, this macho, very testosterone driven, fucking I'm a man and I'm going to fight and rah. But inside of you, that's not the whole Ollie, is it? Because you've never really gone back to the boy at 10 years of age with the monkey. Horrific story, by the way. That, and thank God that something inside of you, we talk about spirituality. I identify that as a spiritual moment in you as a young child to say, fuck, and fight back. Otherwise, you would not be here.
No.
Because a gorilla or a chimp, I mean, they're incredibly powerful. More powerful than any man.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because it does tell me, and I'm sure the watchers and listeners of this podcast, that Ollie was on his mission, his lifelong journey, his desire was to fight. But that takes its toll, doesn't it? And you spoke about, your moment or moments. In fact, it was quite prolonged, wasn't it? You took solace in alcohol. You wiped out the trauma, and then you did go and face that trauma. And it was a deep, deep opening to you, right?
Yeah, correct. The thing is as well, by the time I actually went to face the trauma, I told myself that it didn't need facing.
Did you? So you were denying it as well?
Yeah, I was denying it because I'd stopped drinking. My life had changed. I got my TV deal. I got my books deal. I was a best-selling author. Life was good. I had a partner that I loved and loved me. Everything was great. So why would I have trauma now? And that's what I told myself. So when I actually went to do ayahuasca, something was drawing me to ayahuasca. I was like going, well, I'll do it because it's, I was finding reasons to go and do it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
so life was sweet.
Life was sweet. But the thing is, trauma is it's a stealth. It's a stealth system, isn't it? You know what I mean?
It is,
the stereotypical kind of, waking up at night, sweating and visions of bombs and stuff, maybe for some people, but people shouldn't expect that. And I believe we have got this innate system within us all that when we go through a traumatic event, we have the ability to switch off the intimate trauma. And that helps us get over the short term. That's one of our amazing systems and processes that we've got within us. Because you imagine if you were in the moment of absolute, that 100% horrible trauma, you won't be able to get through it. So this is what I believe, that you're able to switch it off, push it away to get over the short term. but the system wants to pull it back out and unravel it, but we don't. And if we don't actually go through that process, we leave it locked away.
That is such an interesting perspective.
And this is what I truly believe. And if it wasn't for the fact it was forced out of me, then I wouldn't have actually solved that issue within myself, and going back and doing that ayahuasca, I went back and met because it's so interesting as well when I look at it, because every time I recalled that, and I forgot about it for a long time, I'd wiped it out. Every time I recalled that moment, it was silent. There was no noise. It was just me and a chimp rolling around, having a scrap and all this, that, and the other. And I realized actually when I went on that ayahuasca journey, when I actually relived the experience, I felt every single emotion that I felt on that day. And that was the fact I was screaming for my mum. I was absolutely in terror. I knew I was going to die. And I'd not felt that emotion since that day.
Wow.
And I realized the reason there was no noise is because the no noise was the no emotion.
Bloody hell. When you got there, and again, everybody be patient with me here, because Ollie and I have got a limited amount of time in the studio together, because this man's story is incredible. So go check it out on his other outlets. And if you want to work with this man, if you're a corporate or other client, we'll come to that at the end, but through Breakpoint, incredible. But when you found that moment afterwards, how did that feel?
The moment of?
When you found the moment of experiencing the noises, the shouting, the this, the that, I'm imagining that this is, in an ayahuasca environment. So you're obviously, you're in a higher plane of consciousness, or I don't even know that I'm choosing my words right there, but, how did that feel to you post going through that experience? Was there a feeling of peace? And then
there was peace, but let me finish it off and I'll do it as quickly as possible. But basically in that moment when I was going through the attack and it was extremely traumatic, all of a sudden it freeze framed. And those that don't know about ayahuasca, it's extreme. You're there. You are there emotionally and everything. You're there. And in that moment when it was fierce, it was horrendous. All of a sudden it freeze framed, it stopped. And I heard this voice go, what would have happened if you never fought back that day?
Fuck.
And then all of a sudden everything stopped and I lay down. I was dying. That's what was happening. I lay down, I opened my eyes. Laura, my wife, is looking at me with her beautiful blue eyes. And I just looked at her and went, babe, don't worry. There's nothing to worry about. Come with me. And we both closed our eyes and we went into the spirit world. We went into the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, right? We were no longer physical body. We became just source energy, which is where I truly believe that we're all going back to anyway. And we went into this place. We no longer identified as people. It was just this feeling. It was just this honestly amazing, amazing place that I'm looking forward to get back to. I didn't want to leave, but then I heard a voice that said, Ollie, they need you. And when I heard those words, I then came back into my body. And it was from that moment, I was in this ayahuasca thing. I've been in about 3-4 hours. It's an 8-hour experience, this one. And I jumped up. And I was like, oh my God, I've seen the afterlife, this thing that we fear so much, this death that we fear. And it's almost, it's almost fear of death is one thing that, we're the only species on the planet that knows it's going to die. And that is used against us to a great degree a lot of the times. But for me, I saw death and I jumped up and I was in this Maloka in the middle of the jungle, went to see one of the shadows. I was like, I've seen it. I know what's happening. I went running off into the jungle. And went back to my accommodation. I shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed there because I thought it was over. I thought, that's it. Well, I've seen what's happening. It's over. It's finished. So really for me, I went back and I was writing. I was scribbling stuff like you wouldn't believe. And one thing I did scribble down, which is something that really relates and means so much to me now, is pain screams the loudest when it's dying. And this can relate to everyone. You imagine anything in your life that you've got this habitual behavior to keep repeating, which is usually not that good. It could be a relationship. It could be your addiction to alcohol, it could be drugs, whatever it might be. When you're at the point of absolutely severing that, it screams the loudest. And that's when you go back to that relationship and give it a hug. You put a Band-Aid on it, the noise goes away, but then the noise starts coming back slowly over time.
Wow.
Pain screams the loudest when it's dying, should be embraced as the birth of something new. And that for me was that moment. It was the birth of something new. I was finally dealing with that trauma. And it was the birth of a new Ollie. It was the death of the old me. It was the birth of a new Ollie. And a big thing for me in that as well, something else I wrote in that moment was or the moment when I actually died, and that whole message about what would have happened if you'd stopped fighting. I heard this message say, stop fighting, stop fighting. And like I talked to you about before, I'm all for a bit of resistance and putting up a fight. But when it's at the detriment to yourself, you've got to start thinking, is this good for me? I'd fought the system. I'd fought the military. I'd fought my parents. I fought every relationship, everything I'd fought. And for me, it was messages. And those messages were that I've got to stop fighting. I still hear that now. Whenever I go into a situation, stop fighting, drop the guard, embrace, surrender. So there was a lot of messages there. And another thing for me, which I've struggled with, whether that's special forces, whether it's Chimp, I don't know, but compassion is something that I find difficult. And again, it was me, that situation with the Chimp was when I actually went back into it. The first night before I actually got attacked by the Chimp, the night before that, I actually went into the Chimp and I looked at me with my young just before I was about to attack me, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it was so real that because the Chimp had been laid down underneath that vehicle in a hot summer's day, I felt as I went into the Chimp and I was raising to see me in front of my child, I felt the leaves falling off the hairs that were stuck to my back. It was that real.
Oh my God.
And I was starting to, when I was in the Maloka, I was upright like a chimp, as I'd find out the next day as well, everyone told me. I was screeching. That screech I heard as a 10-year-old boy, that I was making that noise. And it was me looking at me. I had this almost like this readout that was like a Terminator threat, and it was pointing at me over my child. And I was preparing for battle.
Wow.
And I felt like I'm ready for this. I'm ready to take him out. And it was in that moment that stopped that first night. And what happened from that is that taught me a lesson about compassion. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. That mother was doing something it was supposed to do, protect its young. It then started making me reflect on the whole lot of my life when I started putting pressure on my wife to do, business stuff because we worked together in the business. There's nothing more important to my wife than her son. And she will always protect that asset over me. And that made me feel a lot of compassion, not only for that Chimp, which helped me solve so much on that day. Instead of me being the victim, me being the focus of attention, it was the Chimp and the compassion for that Chimp doing what it was supposed to do that day. And it changed everything for me, that whole perspective.
Bloody hell. Ollie, that is so powerful, isn't it? I think we all need a piece of that, don't we?
Absolutely.
So there was the spirituality piece. There was,
Can I talk about that?
Please.
Because I'm not supposed to be spiritual.
That's where I wanted to go with this, because when we see Ollie Ollerton, the public face, and we know about your military, but you're right. It's like he can't be spiritual.
Yeah.
And he?
And when I do my talks, when I've done talks in the past, people come up to me and go, you know what, I wasn't expecting that, but thank you.
When I first...
You know what I mean? But, if I can be the voice of reason or knowledge or whatever it might be for some people that are skeptics and trying to be the alpha male because they don't really understand what it truly means to be a man, then the fact of the matter is, it's like spirituality for me is something that I grew into. I didn't just decide it looks cool on Instagram. It was something that was put, it just came my way and it started making so much more sense to me than the narrative would be. I
can ask you a direct question on this. A lot of people say, no, I'm not religious. Religion, spirituality, two very different things. Oprah Winfrey famously, when she recruits at a senior level in her production companies and her companies, she will ask people, may I ask your spiritual beliefs? And she documents this, that a lot of individuals have quakered and gone blush and gone, I'm not religious, because they know she's a Christian. She's like, no, I didn't ask you whether you're religious or what your religious beliefs are. I asked you what your spiritual beliefs are. It's a very different question.
Yeah.
And the two often are very separate.
Yes, let's talk about that as well, because beliefs, right? I truly believe that if you have extremely strong beliefs, then you have limited faith, because faith is about having nothing and feeling good about it anyway. You know what I mean? It's not having these strong beliefs that you have to anchor onto. So religion, I respect religions, and, I'm not religious myself, but I am what I called spiritual. And what I want people to understand, if they learn nothing else from this, we're not just lumps of meat and gravy. There's so much more to who we are. And I define it like this, I say to people, and I said this on the Wellness Festival, actually, I said, people are in this constant search for who, or to discover who they are. And, I've asked people to put their hand up. Everyone, I'm doing that. I've been to the mountains in Tibet. I've been to Peru. I've done ayahuasca 50 times now. I'm still searching. And I'm like, I can solve it for you in one statement. We are a self-healing, self-regenerating energy system capable of creating an outside world through internal thought. And when you are connected to that energy, that source energy, you receive guidance on demand, which is God. God is within us, not without us. We are God, each and every one of us. But we've been programmed to believe that everything good is external to who we are. It's all within. So when it comes to religion, I think that any religion, if it's telling you to look outside of you, I think that's not a great template. But that for me is, that's the only faith I need to understand that we have the ability to create exactly what we want in life. And certainly through my experiences, through the hijacking on the road that day in Iraq, where I imagined the attack the day before, because it was going to keep our contract, which was very lucrative. I imagined the best thing that could happen the next day is an attack. Oh, imagine if that happened. That would seal the deal. I had no idea.
What the fuck?
It was going to happen, but and if it wasn't for the fact that the details were so specific to what I'd imagined the day before, then it would have meant nothing. Including
the end.
Yeah.
When you've gone back into the camp, the enclosed safe area.
The compound, yeah.
The compound, thank you.
Yeah.
And you're sipping champagne. You even, when you sipped that champagne at the end of the real deal, when it did happen, and I mean, that is one hell of a story.
Yeah, and the bubbles going down my throat, which is from the day before.
You
I did imagine that, and felt it. And the smell of the cordite from the bullets. When I was actually in the firefight with the militia, I smelled, one thing you always smell, obviously the noise and everything, but the smell of the cordite in that vehicle as the bullets going down. And as soon as that cordite hit my nasal system, bang, I was like, oh my God, this is deja vu. And it's when I looked to my left as well, when the bullets started going down, there was a sign that said Ramadi. The sign that said Ramadi is where I'd actually was driving past the day before when I went, imagine if it happened here, because it was still a hot spot.
No.
And as the bullets went in, bang, I went Ramadi.
You see, that makes my hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because it's like, how? And I've got my own theories on spirituality and manifestation and bringing into your life what you want to bring in. But again, it does come back to, it has to come from within you, and we are capable of anything. We are.
100%. Well, if we started to understand about quantum and listen, I'm by far an expert on quantum, but quantum physics, when you can rely on quantum physics, it's law. So quantum physics has a double slit experiment. Have you heard the double slit? So basically what it means, they put a load of photons through these slits. And when the photons went through, they made a predictable pattern. But when they were observed, they changed. It's called the observer effect. So they actually changed due to the fact of you observing the photons. It's crazy, right? So we're made of photons, everything. So what they've come back to is the fact that we create reality through our observation. So what we observe, we bring to reality. So this to me then brings the science. I call it SAS, science and spirituality. Or SBS, science but spiritual. And the thing is, when you start understanding that, what the model's trained to do, right, is use the past to predict the future. So when we look at anything, we're using the coding and the experience of the past to then apply that code to the future. So that could be people worrying about money. It could be worrying about a relationship, and you're bringing that into reality because it's your focus.
Yep.
And if you go back to the observer effect, I haven't got time to talk about the actual scientific thing, but if you look on YouTube and look at the double slit experiment, it will tell you all about this. So when I start to realize this is what happens, it's what we observe comes into reality. And that sounds spiritual and manifestation and sounds very Burning Man and everything else, but it's an absolute law. It's physics. So I think and I'm really starting to understand this now. Right?
Yeah, I think there's a growing awareness, isn't there? Because, people like Dr. Tara Swart, I mean, she's a neuroscientist. She was not convinced by this at all.
Yeah.
It was woo-woo. And then she started to do it herself. She's like, how has that just happened? How has my visualization board started to happen? How has that manifestation started to happen? And she's a scientist, so she needed black and white and then realized there is no black and white.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you this, mate, because this is like, for me, this is jumping across the things that what happened. And then I got to that point where the attack on the road that day. But the thing is, I was drinking so much alcohol and stuff that, I didn't really allow that to benefit. I didn't sit there going, oh my God, the world's so different to what, it was afterwards. I was just back into the mayhem of drinking, drugs, all kinds of stuff and being shot at on a regular basis, which is not a great recipe. But it was only when I came back to the UK 2015 and I went, I am sick of who I am. I cannot stand who I am anymore. I cannot keep doing this. I was 43 years old. I had absolutely nothing but a road of mayhem behind me, a bad drinking problem and drugs and anything I could get my hands on. And it's when I went into that house that I went, no, I am changing who I am. But I had to believe that we can change, first of all. Neuroplasticity states that we can change, and we can. This whole leopard never changes his spots and all that, which is his ex-wife's mantra. We can absolutely change. So in this house...
But we have to decide.
We have to decide, yeah. So in this house, 3 things: mind, body, and nutrition. And I started doing these things that I even thought they were crazy. I had nowhere else to go. Visualization, meditation, goal setting, all this stuff. And I came up with this concept that I was going to start this company called Breakpoint. And back then it was this physical interpretation of Special Forces selection. We take corporates, we get under their skin, we wipe away their ego, exactly like Special Forces selection does. We put them through the physical, the emotional, all the elements of Special Forces selection to bring out people in the end that have a raw connection to themselves. That was the model. I visualized that every single day, how it would look, how, I was there, put myself in it, all my 5 senses, touch, taste, all that stuff. And then at the end of it, I was thinking, this shit don't work. Nothing's happening. My family were getting concerned. I had no money. And I started to doubt everything. I was like, I just wanted something. Give me something, please. Nothing happened. And then and I actually did do this in this house. I was like, dropped to my knees and I was like, please just give me something. I want something just to validate what I'm doing. Nothing happened. And then 2 days after that, I got the call from Foxy, my best mate, who I knew from the military. He was like, hey, that idea you've got for Breakpoint you were doing with the corporates, would you do that on national TV? And I'm like, So anyone that says to me that visualization and this stuff doesn't work, you keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Wow. So basically, for those that don't know, the TV show became exactly the format that I described for the corporate world.
No way. No way.
Yeah, there you go.
So how do you take then, talking about Breakpoint, and again, quite an expansive question, I guess, but you say there, you've just given us a very condensed version of taking executives and I don't like this term, but I'm going to use it. Why? I don't know. Normal people, right? I really don't like that term. When someone says, you're not normal. Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. I tend to say thanks. I don't want to be normal, but what is normal? It's a big question, right? Because your idea of normal is very different to my idea of normal, blah, 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 blah. But you take, normal individuals and you put them through this process and it's a very structured program, days and everything else. But is there a common breakpoint? When we speak about ego, you mentioned ego. Ego's particularly in men, but also in females.
Yeah.
It's something which, it's a word now that's bandied a lot. Just your ego, and it's like, is there a common thing that you see within your programs, and I don't just mean on the TV, but I mean in your actual personal guided programs through Breakpoint? Is there something you notice time and time again that limits people?
I think the limiting factor with everyone is the lack of understanding of who we are. You know, Breakpoint really for me is the gateway to your higher self. It's the moment of absolute pure pressure, which then becomes the gateway to the highest version of yourself. Now, for me, you know, Breakpoint being attacked by a chimp, that was the gateway to my higher self. That was in quite a shocking circumstances. But I'm talking about, you look at how many people get to the point of pressure and turn back. And little did they know that just a little bit more.
Well, they always say that, don't they?
Yeah.
When you're on the, like you, when you're in the home, in your house, and people and your friends, relatives are all saying, "Ollie, come on, mate, just go and get a job. You know, just to stop this fucking. You know, you're this far." And people who can't see me on just listening on audio, I'm now showing my fingers almost touching
half an inch.
You're literally that far from the tipping point of
creating the business, creating the breakthrough, getting the relationship, getting the job.
Yeah, but you know, it's like, and that's what differentiates somebody who's like outstanding.
Yeah.
To
the problem with us all is the fact that we are so addicted to comfort zones. We're addicted to understand that we should live within our limits. But the thing is, the longer you live within your limits, the wall thickens on the inside. And then before you know it, you can't even move.
I love that.
And it's understanding, like, I didn't want to get in the ice bath this morning. Everything was telling me not to get in it. That never changes. But, you know, the ice bath for me, I know about the physical benefits. So that obviously means a lot to me. But really for me, it's the mental.
Yeah.
If I give into that today and I go, oh, you know what? You did it yesterday. You know, just ease off today, you know. I might then do that. Circumstances might not allow me to do that tomorrow.
It may spill into 2 days, 3 days,
and
a
then
week.
Once you do that, we are such a creature of habit. We become who we were yesterday, the day before. You know, you do it once.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an isolated event. You do it twice. We start to build the process.
So this is where you've almost read my next question.
All right.
Because I was going to say, how does when you've taken this person to that realization, or people to that realization, how does the person and how do you effect lasting change? You talk about getting in the ice bath this morning. You did it again. You've gone in, even though you say, no, I don't want to do it, because that's your discipline.
Yeah.
So how does effective lasting change, what is the advice you could give to listeners, viewers, saying, all right, well, no, I get it now. I've got to do that to make a change. Let's say it's quitting alcohol, right?
Yeah.
In order to stay off alcohol forever, you've got to make, firstly, a choice, commitment, and be bloody disciplined, especially if you're addicted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's
First of all, I say the thing with everything is, what's your why? If you haven't got a why, then you're gonna be back to where you were yesterday. You've got to have a strong why. It's like if I'm going to say I'm going to stop coffee, why? I've got to have a why. I've got to know the science of why I would give up coffee. Otherwise, I'm not going to bother doing it. If I'm going to give up alcohol, I've got to go through the process of understand why. I've got to create a strong why of why that's not, you know, for me, alcohol, destruction, mayhem, upsetting other people, you know, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. Elephant in the room.
They say with the why as well, Ollie, you need to ask the why 5 times to get to the root. That's something Simon Sinek writes a lot about, you know, start with why, but then so it's not just one why.
Yeah.
So for example, let's take alcohol. I shouldn't drink anymore. I haven't drank, as you know, I haven't drank for almost 10 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. My choice, because again, it was destructive. It was a shit show. And I was self-destroying myself and hurting people around me. Not good. So when I said why, they were lame at first, the why. The first why was pretty lame.
Yeah.
To be honest. But then when I kept drilling myself, that I think it was the 5th why that was like, well, that's a no-brainer then. Fuck it. Just stop it.
You know what? I've done something I actually did an exercise in my book, Battle Ready. It's a call to action, that book. But that's really about that process in the house. But basically, I did a thing called the purpose pyramid. So for those that can't see, I'm drawing a pyramid on the table. You put your subject matter in the center of that pyramid, right? So that could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be anything that's dominating some of your time that you start to question, why am I doing this? And that's the first thing you've got to, it's awareness, isn't it? Awareness is the key. If you're not aware of these things, you just program walking through life, you know, floating through life. Awareness of the subject matter, first of all. For me, alcohol, why am I doing that? What's the purpose of it? Is it doing me any good? So I put that in the center of the pyramid and I asked myself 3 questions around that. First of all, do I enjoy it? Now, of course, I'm going to say a lot of people say, yeah, of course I enjoy it for a few hours. Do you enjoy it? I'm talking over as a more overview, generalized view. So first of all, do I enjoy it? Second question, does it add growth? Physical, mental,
No.
Financial?
No.
No. Does it help others? That's a definite cross. I had 3 crosses. Get rid of that. And this is all you need to do. And then you can take that. I mean, I've got an exercise you go through where you actually then start to break down those questions.
And isn't it obviously a lot more powerful as well when you see it there?
What
written down.
What gets written down gets done. And this is the thing. We can't outthink a bad thought. You can sit there and say, oh, I shouldn't be drinking anymore. I really don't want to drink anymore. That's not enough. When you've got such a hard-rooted, wired behavior, you're going to have to meet the emotion with some action. Otherwise, it's just pointless. So really, for me, giving up drinking, you got to really understand why. And let's have a look. Right, Breakpoint is also this. It's a disruptive change in habitual behavior in line with a predetermined goal. So when you take the why, you then have to create the goal. Okay, if you've got nothing to anchor on, it's just going to be a detour into discomfort for no reason. So you need to know exactly where you're going. Otherwise, it's pointless.
Isn't it amazing? Because it's funny when you're talking, my mind sort of sees a whiteboard, and I'm like, whenever you brainstorm something strategically in the corporate world, I'm absolutely certain in the military, because we've all seen it on the films, where okay guys, it's usually Americans, isn't it? Okay guys, well, this is what we're going to do, and this is plan, and then they're mapping it out, because there's the reason why we're doing this. Yeah. There's the plan. Yeah. And then there's the execution of that's the outcome.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly the reason in the Special Forces, before we went on an operation, various operations we've been on, we'd go to a big hangar, big industrial hangar. We would make a mock-up of the actual building we were going to attack.
Fuck.
So you would, while the time you're waiting for the green light to go, and that could be anything from an hour to 12 hours, whatever it might be, you are going through drills, bang, bang, going through that target area. So that by the time you step onto target, you've been there before. We are visual creatures with everything.
That's incredible. And why should it be any different? It's like sportsmen, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of sportsmen, golfers, for example, I'm picking that one out as many examples. Golfers see the shot before they play it. As they're addressing the ball, they're visualizing. Yeah.
They've rehearsed it. And even before they've got on the golf course, they're doing that. And everyone then goes, wow, isn't he a great golfer? Why are we not doing what the golfer's doing?
That's what I was just going to say. Why do we drift through?
Yeah, why do we think that person is unique and we're not?
Oh, I'm just going to start dating this person. Right. Yeah. What have you got in common? Not a lot. But it might be all right. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is the thing, again, with this stuff, commitment, absolute determination, because when you go into the quantum laws and quantum physics and everything else, the doubt is like you chucking a massive obstacle between you and the goal. And this is another thing about goals, because I've changed a lot since I read my book, Battle Ready. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in there. And this is a great thing because it shows that I'm evolving, but there's a lot of stuff in there. I could do a V2 of that book now. One of the things I used to say is you must have a clear, definite line with a date on it of when you want to achieve it. It's the worst thing you can do. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have it in your head when you want to, because there's stuff you've got to do between now and then.
Yeah.
But if you I want to create that goal in 6 months' time, you're going to be moving through life with a 6-month gap between you and your goals. You'll always keep that between you and your goal. What you can do is embrace the person that's achieved it. Embrace the emotion, embrace the feeling of what that person feels like to actually have achieved it. And that's what I did that day on the road with that attack.
Yeah.
Now on that attack, right, I had no knowledge of this stuff. That attack, I dreamt it one day, it happened the next. Incredible. And I've considered, okay, so why can't I do that now then? Can't do it now because when it happened back then in 2003, I think it was, 2003, 2004, I had no knowledge of this stuff working. So I wasn't putting any pressure on the outcome. It flowed. And this is another thing when we come to we want something in life. Like I came back and I started telling my mum all this stuff when I first got back to the UK. And she's, well, I want £1 million, but I've not got it. You know what I mean? But you're desperate. First of all, there's no emotion in £1 million. There's emotion in what you can spend the money on, and the experiences you can have, but there's no emotion in that. And also it's the desperation of something that creates the resistance.
Wow.
So it is a, it's getting all these things right, but really taking away, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff I do now is what would it take? I'm not putting any pressure on the outcome. What would it take for us to find a house in a country where there's sunshine, there's loads of opportunity, and I'm happy every day? Oh, Dubai. And that's the way me and Laura have dealt with everything.
Yeah.
No pressure on, because if we complain about what we're sick of, you're going to get more of that here.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And it's also, don't run from a problem until you face it, which is what we've really gone deep on today.
Yeah.
Don't run from a problem until you face it, because guess what? You up and go and live in another country and you've not dealt with your problems, whether that be relationship problems, you and Laura are incredibly happy. She's the love of your life.
Yeah.
You spoke about this, you two are like, you're one.
I say about Laura though.
You're still individuals though, aren't you?
We are still individuals. Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, when I went into that house, I designed Laura.
Did you?
I designed Laura, and I said, I want someone that's...
You visualised
I visualised the person, not her fate, nothing like that. It was just, I visualised this person. Characteristics. I wanted someone to be spiritual, but not too much. That was like, because at the end of the day, we're here to have a human experience, not a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
So I wanted someone that was that kind of way, because I was obviously stumbling into that in that time myself. And I also I would meet someone not in a pub for the first time ever in my life.
Wow.
Because every girlfriend prior to that, good and bad, I'd met in a pub. And then you meet a drinking partner, not you drink someone you can get absolutely, oh, do you want a drink? You know the answer is never going to be no.
Oh my God. Ollie, there's so much to talk about. You've got these amazing programs, Breakpoint, you've got another thing, Stealth Reset, it's tons, yeah?
I say about Stealth Reset because you did ask that question. I want to very quickly just tell you about that.
Yeah.
Stealth Reset is for me, and this, because 5% conscious mind, 95% subconscious, which is really the driving machine. Over a period of time, what's basically happened though, the servant has become the master. Whereas, our conscious mind is where we should be dreaming things. We should be wanting, creating the vision of what we want. But now we just become respondent to the habits and behaviors.
Is this where you meditate and take time out?
Absolutely.
And do the ice bath? Yeah. And because no matter how busy life gets,
yeah,
I guess what you're alluding to here is take time out to have the dreams.
Yeah.
To
Absolutely. What we're told from an early age.
Yeah. Don't
remember this. Who do you think you are?
Man, yes, I do remember that.
Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Look at you dickhead. Who do you think you are? You know what I mean? It's like...
I just have that as a child, by the way. I had that in adulthood as well. In fact, I think people still say it about me now.
But the thing is, it's the lack of us thinking who we are that's the reason for us not creating the life that we want.
I agree.
And it's all this messaging as a kid, stop looking out the window, stop doing this, stop dreaming, you're a dreamer. Of course, be a dreamer, look out the window. Start to think someone that you want to be, and it will happen. Yeah. But for me, what happens is, because we've got the conscious mind now, which is basically based on all our limitations, things created by the environment. When you go to sleep, you go from beta to alpha to theta. So beta is normal frequency, everyday life. And then we go into alpha when we're relaxing, then theta. And what happens in theta, and this is documented well by people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton. The theta gateways then open. And for those that don't know, the conscious mind, which is the analytical, the self-criticizing mind, it's off guard. The guard man has gone to sleep on his sentry post. The subconscious is open to suggestion. So basically what Stealth Reset is, you listen to suggestive affirmations as you fall into sleep. So the whole idea is that you do fall asleep while you listen to it, because you're going through the theta gateway for a short period of time before you get into deep sleep. And that is when the conscious mind is off guard. The subconscious is wide open to suggestion. We can start laying in these new character traits, that then followed by a micro action the next day to then start to create momentum. It's the course before the course, because 90% of people that buy online courses do not even finish the course. 60% don't even access the platform. 10% don't even make it past the first module.
Wow.
This is a way to stop that. And that's my mission. My mission is to get people to take action, but you can't do that without the stimulation of it. The problem is getting people to actually do the stealth reset, but lying down and doing nothing, surely that's a lot of people. That's a dream, right? So that is really the stealth reset series. And we're doing all stuff on confidence. We're doing stuff on abundance. Yeah, but it's that theta gateway opening. You got to believe in the system.
Yeah, you have. And I think, I'll come more to this at the end when I wrap up this episode, but it's interesting to sit opposite you and listen to you and have, been exposed to your public speaking, taking a bit of a deeper dive into what you do in part of my research to today. When we think about this macho military man, there's a softer side to you. I'm going to say you're in touch with your feminine energy.
100%.
And I think that's important for a lot of macho alpha males as well. Come on, guys. Fucking, you're missing the beat here. There is a side to all of us. And it doesn't mean to say you've got to be soft and namby-pamby and all the rest of it, but you've got to soften yourself. But that's a whole other subject. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, let me just address that quickly, because a lot of men are holding themselves back because they're in the moment where it's like they can't, look at it in this sense. They can't ask for help from a mate. When it comes to a problem, they've got financial issues or they've got...
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's the fact that I don't need anyone. I can do it myself. All this bullshit. Even if it's not asking for help directly for sort of financial, even if you're just struggling mentally. Exactly. This whole thing, but it's like, even if at the forefront of like, what's he talking about? It's the fact that we can't just ask for help when it's like we just need stuff on man stuff. We've got no hope if we can't get past that block. But the fact of the matter is, the lone wolf is a myth. It's a survival mechanism, right? If you're the lone wolf, everything's fucked. We thrive in community. We thrive with people around us. And this is where, when you are struggling, and this adoption of the male and the feminine energy, this is what we need to adopt. It's having that. And that means that you are compassionate. You are, you're in touch with your emotions. You can identify with that. And that is the person that will ask for help off his mate. That will be the person who said, look, I'm struggling a bit mentally. And that is, it doesn't have to be the fact that you're painting your nails and having a massage every, it means that we're flipping just in touch with our,
I agree. I agree with you.
And masculine state. It's the law of polarity.
It is.
Another science.
It is. So
we could talk forever, couldn't we?
We just could. So very quickly, what's really, really super exciting you in your life right now? And I know you've got a lot of projects. Something else happening today that you're talking about. We can't talk about that, but keep your eye on Ollie and some of his close friends.
Yes.
Clue there.
Yeah.
Right. But what's really like giving you zest at the moment, Ollie? What's the one or a few things that make you go, yes?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's scaling up and learning. I mean, every day that Laura, we sat in the office together, she says, do you want to hear another testimonial?
Wow.
And you hear that testimonial, that's the best paycheck in the world for me. To hear someone, and there are quite severe messages sometimes, I was at the brink of taking my own life.
Jesus.
I read your book or I did your course and now I've got my own business. I've got this, I've stopped drinking. That to me is a game changer. That to me is that nothing can beat that. So that, and having this model now that we can scale up, and we've got people all over the world doing these courses is just incredible. It's like I no longer have to trade time for money, which is really how you do scale up, on a massive level.
Of course, yeah.
So I can get out, Breakpoint is a globally identified brand recognized for the positive growth and development of others. Came up with that years ago. And I want as much global coverage as possible and get to as many people as possible and start changing their lives.
Yeah.
So that fills me full of absolute inspiration every day.
I love that. I mean, why do you do what you do? Probably the same answer, really, I'm guessing.
I think really innately, each and every one of us wants to help someone.
I think so.
Yeah. And we thrive from it. It's a no-brainer really, isn't it? To understand that. And you can look at all the division in society these days. As a collective, we are unstoppable, absolutely unstoppable. And to bring as many people together, to drop, the preconceived sort of ideas of other nations, other people. I went to a UFC kind of fight the other week, and I was just sit there, and I loved it, but I was clapping for each opponent. I wanted one guy to win, but I was still clapping for the other guy.
Yeah.
And hearing the booing and all this, I thought, drop that shit, guys. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like that.
No, it just doesn't.
And that typified really, if people could just drop that and everyone get on, it doesn't mean you don't want someone else to win and all that stuff. But, I really want to change that dynamic. And so really that drives me forward. It gives me, it's my energy for life. It's not my new mission to change as many lives as possible. So.
I love that. And does that fall into, if there was something that you could leave as a legacy, because, you've got this great business now, it does not mean that it's not a transaction of time for return per se. So if there is a legacy that you wish to leave behind, because none of us are going to be here forever, right? We want healthy lives. We want to be here for as long as we possibly can, of course. What is it?
It's simple for me. And I'm going to have to put a number on it because it makes it more credible, doesn't it? But I want to change 1 million lives. I want to be known as the person that changed lives. I don't want to be known as, I'm proud to be known as the guy from the SAS and the TV show stamped that in stone, but I want to be known for the person that changed so many lives. I want to be known individually and not so much on a grander scale. It means more to me about the individual that sat at home that would have taken his life and hasn't. So from an individual basis, I want that to be my legacy. That's the guy that saved my dad's life. That's what I want to leave.
And would you like that to be your final thought?
I would.
All right. Thank you, Ollie. It really has been an honor and a pleasure to sit
Likewise
around this table in Dubai with somebody that I really, truly, hand on heart, admire you. I do.
Thank you.
Because of your own personal battles and what you've looked in your own eyes and dealt with it. That earns my utmost respect to anybody who does that. So, watchers, listeners, if you're on YouTube, wherever you're finding this episode with Ollie Ollerton, I think what we've heard is a great story for sure, but it's that story of, recognizing that the power lies within ourselves to make effective change. And also not to forget that helping others ultimately gives you great reward and satisfaction. Please support us, follow us, hit subscribe, whether if you're watching this on YouTube. And I am grateful to every single guest that comes and shares their story with me on So What's Your Story. But today I'm especially grateful to Ollie Ollerton. A real pleasure, a real honor. Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you so much.
I wish you nothing but health, happiness, success, and love.
Thank you. Likewise.